to start digging. We'll find Hank. We'll find my pills. He's probably dead by now, but he still has my pills.
Welcome to week 40 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We finished episode 193 yesterday, and that originally aired Monday, April 29th, 1985. And we're thinking sweeps may have started.
This is just too action-packed to be a regular episode.
Hank holds a gun on Gina and Ted and says he thinks he has 4 more bullets.
So that makes me think that gunshot that brought Cruz and Santana into the tunnel was maybe just him firing at the ceiling or something like that.
Santana runs into the tripwire, knocking over the nitroglycerin and causing an explosion. The tunnels cave in. Gina and Ted regain consciousness. Hank is nowhere to be seen. Gina tells Ted she's become addicted to pills and that they have to find the bag that Hank had. We'll find Hank and we'll find my pills, she says. He's probably dead right now, but we'll find my pills. So Ted helps her dig a little bit, but he'd rather try and dig them out. So he seems to alternate his attention between trying to clear the door and helping her. And at one point, Gina finds the pills and doesn't let Ted know for some reason, and quickly takes 2 of them.
Yeah.
Don't know why she couldn't just tell Ted, but maybe she's worried he'll take them from her.
And he does comment a few times on the air getting a little thinner and that, and worrying about the oxygen. So, this shows how on the edge they really are, and perhaps how misplaced Gina's priorities are at this moment.
I think he says we've been digging for an hour or something at one point.
Yeah.
Seems like a big waste of air. Lakin is running around in the Lockridge house. She can't find anyone. Warren comes in the front door and says he thinks the tunnel collapsed. Warren confirms that Minx was upstairs napping and that she's gone back to sleep. So I was kind of hoping we'd see Minx wandering around in the tunnels, but she's actually not even in this episode. And she's safe and sound. They go into the basement and find the entrance to the tunnel collapsed and Augusta's scarf. I think she had on as a headscarf yesterday, didn't she?
Yeah, she was
walked
wearing
in with
quite
the glasses
an elaborate
and
headscarf.
So Warren phones the yacht to see if Lionel is there. There's no answer. Maggie arrives and she helps them dig. Maggie says that Cruz was in the tunnel all night waiting for the killer. And Warren says, well, the killer might have gotten Cruz. Firefighters arrive and start digging. At the Capwell side, Cece's just about to see Mason's tape when he hears the explosion and runs out of the room. He has Rosa search the house to make sure Brandon's okay. And Mason arrives and helps Cece start clearing the tunnel. Rosa comes back and says she couldn't find Gina or Ted, and that Santana was in the study with Cruz. Warren phones to tell them that Augusta is missing on their end. The courier is still wandering around the house dressed as a telephone repairman, and she receives the order to kill Kelly. Lionel is at work, and he's given his boss some great new ideas to increase mattress sales, like hiring some models and having them come board on the bed all day.
Now, I thought work looked a lot like the Lockridge yacht.
I think maybe he had Mr. Zimmerman come over to his place on his first day of work. So, yeah, that is kind of interesting. I mean, we'll probably see a mattress store set later in the week. So then he has to go because he's got that appointment at noon at the Capwell house, and he runs into Sophia on the front porch. Then Marcello arrives, and then Maggie arrives. Lakin arrives, and then Mason says, Dad, are you all right? And Cece says, I don't need that from you. Eden arrives, finds out that Cruz was in the tunnel, and then finds out that Santana is with him.
So a lot of mixed emotion for Eden in this moment, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
She's worried about Cruz, but I'm not entirely sure she's thrilled that Santana's trapped down there with him.
No. Like they're having a grand time down there.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, someone, I think it's Marcello and Mason, go search and confirm Ted and Gina's car are both still there.
Mm-hmm.
Cece's telling the firefighters that he heard an explosion. The firefighters are starting to clear the Capwell end at this point, but all of the families basically clustered in the study, including Lakin and Lionel and Marcello. Oh, I guess he's family now. Cece tells everyone to stay calm, which kind of gets Lionel's hackles up. He says, we don't need your lectures. It's obvious we should stay calm. We should be helping the firefighters.
Yeah.
So Lionel kind of goads Cece into going down with him and helping to dig.
Yeah.
Lindsay arrives, and Eden wants to know who he is. And he says that they've met before. Doesn't go into too much detail. Eden says, I think you've come a little late. I'm not sure what she's referring to.
I don't know what that means.
She's maybe just annoyed that the explosion happened and he's shown up unexpectedly. But Mason says timing is everything, implying that perhaps Lindsay set the explosion. Mason pulls Lindsay outside and suggests that he leave before Cece sees them. I've got a feeling Cruz wants to tell him about you and Channing. And Lindsay said, yeah, I think you're worried because you want to be the one to tell him yourself.
I think Lindsay's got a pretty good handle on Mason.
Well, of course, Maggie had spotted them leaving the study, so she comes out and says, no one is leaving at all. So Warren comes down the steps, so they've cleared down to the bottom of the stairs at this point. They're now digging into that straight tunnel.
So I would think they're actually fairly close to where Cruz and Santana are.
I would think so. Warren takes over, and Cece and Lionel get sent back upstairs. Cece comes out of the study and says that the fire chief has just told him there may not be any survivors. The chances of anyone having enough air is slight. So that's not really something you want to tell all the grieving people at this point. I think you should hold off until the bodies are being brought up.
I think so.
Cruz regains consciousness and shields Santana from some falling debris, and then he performs mouth-to-mouth until she regains consciousness. And she says that she glimpsed a shadow just before the explosion. And Cruz says that's probably Channing's killer. He tells her all about what's been going on, and he quizzes her about Channing, and she says that he was different after she got back from Acapulco. Distant. Then one day, he was his old self again and wanted to get back together. But then one night, he left really angry about something, and the next morning sent her flowers. She says, I think there was another woman. Cruz had a really interesting look on his face when she said that.
Yeah.
So they end up digging for quite a while, and Cruz finds a glove. So at first I thought, is it the gloved hand? But then I thought, could it be Augusta's glove?
That's what I thought.
He looks through the gap and says, oh my God! That is our cliffhanger for a Monday episode.
I think he perhaps sees Augusta, and I think Augusta was maybe the shadow, but I don't think she necessarily said it.
So it's possible that the gloved hand was long gone by then. And Augusta was wondering.
She might have been just making her way to the meeting. And, kind of in her own way, she often likes to add a little bit of drama to everything. So.
Or she had something hidden down there.
Or she had something hidden.
Or she's worried that either Lionel or Warren is the killer and wanted to do one last sweep to see what Cruz may have found.
Yeah. So we don't know if Hank is dead or alive. He might be crawling around with his gun.
I assume he's in the room.
Yeah.
I don't think he could have gotten out before the collapse without going past Gina and Ted. And Can't think of anyone else who might have been in the tunnels. Marcello is upstairs.
Everyone
Lindsay's
else
upstairs.
is accounted for at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Just Augusta. I think it's quite possible Augusta's not in the tunnel. But then the gloved hand, may or may not be in the tunnel, depending on who it is.
The person I'm actually the most concerned for at this point, as I say, I think most of them will ultimately make it out of the tunnel alive. But I'm a little concerned about Ted because he knows a lot of Gina's secrets at this point. He knows about her addiction. She completely loses it in the tunnel. Cruz has a much better crisis partner than Ted does in this situation because Santana just pitches in and helps.
Yeah.
Whereas,
she says she's digging.
Yeah.
She says, "Oh, I'm dizzy," but then she's still helping to dig. So.
Exactly. Whereas Gina just goes to pieces, and she actually confesses to Ted that she tried to kill Hank. And she starts to talk about some of her very shady background. Now, she stops herself from confessing that she's not pregnant, but she's told Ted a lot. And I wouldn't be half surprised if, they just about reach the point of getting rescued and she beans Ted on the head with a rock or something to put him in a coma for a while so he can't reveal her secrets.
Yeah, because she says, "Oh, I tried to run over Hank," and he says, "But that could have hurt the baby."
Yeah.
But Ted's really gung-ho in this, episode. It's like that's really part of his personality. Just see the brighter side of "Oh, I bet Dad's got a crew down here already and they'll get to us in 10 minutes. So,
it'll be really interesting to see how Gina handles Ted after this. If they are both rescued intact, it'll be interesting to see how this is handled. I'm also going to be really interested to see, once Santana gets pulled out of that tunnel, just what the dynamics are between her, Cruz, Eden, and of course Lindsay.
Yes, she may know Lindsay. She may know Lindsay as Channing's friend. And then, of course, both Mason and Cece were kind of interested that Santana was there. Rosa had to say, no, she just wanted to see Brandon and leave again. So.
Yeah.
That's another triangle. All in the study.
There's just a lot of intersecting dynamics that I think are going to happen once everyone's out of that tunnel.
So Ted's been in his second cave-in?
Yeah. We've had now 2 sweeps, and both of them have featured Ted trapped in a cave.
I like these. Well, it's not really a natural disaster, is it? But it's as good of a disaster because it encompasses our main characters. So. Well, I'm sad that we probably won't see those beautiful tunnels again. Cece's planning to have them demolished anyway.
It looks like the glove has done a pretty good job of doing that for him.
Sadly. May have seen the last of the tunnels and the two-way mirror. But maybe they'll come with some other exciting, I don't know what you would call it, plot point. That is it for the Monday episode, but it seems like it'll be an exciting week.
I think so.
Who knows who will get out of this unscathed. We will be back after we watch episode 194 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
I think there was another woman, Cruz.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 194 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Tuesday, April 30th, 1985. Gina digs up her money. So she's had a great time in the tunnel. She got her pills and her money.
Yeah, actually, she comes out of this little adventure ahead.
Because Ted finds Hank crushed to death. But win-win-win for Gina.
Yeah.
She pretends she hasn't found her pills and then suggests to Ted she thinks she can kick the habit on her own. She says, don't you think I can just kick it? Obviously, she's got, what looks like a couple months' worth of supply, but she might get it through it in a week. The way she's been eating them. Gina tells Ted all her troubles with Hank. So, I guess she's going to have either an ally or a potential enemy in Ted, with all that knowledge he has.
Well, I have to say, I was very happy that she did not end up cushioning him with a rock.
She says, I hope Hank's in hell.
Yeah.
Ted loses consciousness. Gina takes a pill. Gina tells God to take her instead of Ted. And then she hears something, possibly digging, as she starts banging a rock against the debris.
So actually, at the end of the day, Gina was actually a much more helpful person than we might have predicted, because after Ted passes out, she screams and pounds away on the rocks and actually gets them rescued.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. She saving all her energy just digging for pills rather than lifting heavy debris.
So it actually worked out, and as I say, I was fearing the worst for Ted, but Gina seems to have become very protective of him, which is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. Kelly arrives and wonders what's going on. Cece says he feels as helpless as when he was in that farmhouse with Marcello. Marcello doesn't really care for that, and
No.
Sophia notices a nasty look on his face and says, you haven't really forgiven him at all. And he says, no, you're just imagining things.
Now, I have to kind of agree with Marcello's point of view in this episode, because all through the episode, Sophia's kind of hassling him, saying, oh, we have to talk about that nasty look you had on your face. And Marcello keeps telling her it's really not the time. And I agree with him. It isn't really the time to go into that kind of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when you think about it, and everything that happened, why shouldn't he have a nasty look on his face?
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if he had fully forgiven CC, he's not going to suddenly just be okay with everything.
Yep. Mason throws out... oh, sorry, that's wrong. And Eden joins in to help dig. Mason throws out a couple of reporters who've sneaked in, and he ends up throwing a very expensive camera out the window, out the door. Then he proceeds to tell Maggie that she and Cruz blew it with their plan, that they caused all this. Warren starts shouting at Mason for having a go at Maggie, and Rosa breaks it up.
Yeah.
Then Lakin says to Mason, we haven't seen you with a shovel. So Mason gets guilted into digging, because I guess someone will have to teach me how to use one of these things.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Eden's covered in grime from digging, and Cece and Lionel, who are both a lot older than Mason, have gotten in, and Warren, of course, and we've even seen Lindsay pitch in by the end of the episode. So, yeah, really, Mason needed to get in there and help, too.
The fire chief tells Cece they've dug about a third of the tunnel. Now, this is weird to me, because every time we see them digging, they're still next to the stairs. Did I mistaken that? Or are they just always at the bottom of the stairs, digging towards Cruz and Santana? Like, I can't imagine how that's a third of the tunnel.
All I can think is that maybe they've done quite a bit of their digging in from the Lockridge side.
Maybe. It's got to be something like that.
Yeah.
Or there's another bend to the tunnel that they've been digging in where no one is. So he's considering packing it in and taking his crew home, but Cece says, well, the rest of us are going to keep digging, and I guess kind of gets guilted into saying, oh, I'll order some auxiliary oxygen.
Seems like a pretty pointless rescue crew.
Yeah, maybe he's not, maybe he didn't get his job through Cece, and he's not too concerned. Like a lot of the other people in Santa Barbara. Yeah, you would think you would keep digging for the bodies, at least.
Yeah, I mean, in real life, they keep going, and when they have lost all hope, which is not usually after an hour, it's usually, judging by what I've seen on various newscasts, after several days, then they bring in the cadaver dogs or whatever, so...
But I think, he didn't appear to be... No one appeared to be using oxygen, so maybe they just got to the point where they figured there's no oxygen left in the tunnel, and they probably, would need oxygen to try and go deeper or something. I don't know. Jackie tells Lakin not to give up hope, and Lakin says she was just going to have that big talk with Ted today.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not quite sure what the nature of it is, but it sounds like, yesterday she said she thought Ted was right, so maybe she's thinking of getting back together with him.
Now, having said that, I'm not entirely sure. In this particular episode, everyone is in a crisis. But given the way things have shaken out with Ted and Jackie's situation, I'm not sure in normal circumstances Jackie would still be a person Lakin would confide in regarding matters related to Ted.
I know, it took her a long time to believe her dad that nothing was happening with Sophia. I can't imagine that Ted and Jackie won her over very quickly, that nothing was happening between them.
And in the episode where we first, or really the only episode where we met Miss Lamley, it seemed like everyone had been whispering about Ted and Jackie, and Lakin just did not look very impressed with him for most of that episode. So
now it's interesting, because Jackie lives with Jade and Marissa. One of them should theoretically have overheard these rumors at the school, if not Marissa, certainly Jade, because she's a student. So it's weird that she didn't give anyone a heads up that there was some talk.
Yeah. But she may not, Jade may not feel the same kind of loyalty or whatever to Jackie that perhaps Amy would, and Amy wouldn't necessarily know about these things. I don't know really what Jade and Marissa's relationship is with Jackie. Jackie is very much Amy's friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like they should have had a bit of a
I just think Jade would be Team Lakin rather than Team Jackie.
I think she would have gossiped with Amy a bit.
Maybe
it all just happened really quickly. Maybe someone came in and said, "Oh, I saw them dancing together at the State Street Bistro the other day. Didn't have a chance to tell anyone until just this morning."
Yeah.
So Kelly decides to take Brandon to a train museum. That sounds boring to me, but they have train rides there, and a lot of trains you can look inside, look at, I guess. The courier follows them there and tries to find a good place to kill Kelly. Follows them into an empty train car at one point, but then there's some other tourists visiting, luckily for her. So the courier backs off there. She's walking around with a handgun hidden in a newspaper, which she takes out once or twice. Meanwhile, there's a photographer who takes pictures of kids in the trains for money, I guess, who takes a shine to Kelly and takes quite a few photos of her, or her and Brandon, I guess. Brandon gets off his train ride early because he sees a collie, and there's a breakdown on the train. He sees a dog, so he jumps off and follows the dog, and the train continues on without him. Conductor's not too worried, says to Kelly, he probably got off where I had the breakdown, just over by the warehouse or whatever it was. So he sends Kelly back there.
Very much an age before cell phones and viral videos, and I could just imagine in this day and age you'd have an irate parent shooting a video of him not caring and then posting it right away.
He starts out with, "Oh, I'm on my break."
Yeah.
But he probably got off back there. So Brandon follows this collie into a restricted area, and it looks like, I don't know, the kind of place that might have electricity in it.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Maybe a generator or something.
I have a feeling that photographer is going to play a key role in helping to, I don't know, find Kelly and Brandon, or whatever happens after this episode.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is maybe he'll realize Kelly's looking for Brandon, because obviously he knows she was with the boy. Might, team up with her to find him.
Yeah.
My first thought was he'll stop the courier from killing her. But I'm thinking now, thinking it through a little, it would be actually better if he gets home, develops the pictures, and spots the courier with a gun in some of his photos, and then goes to track down Kelly to tell her that her life is in danger.
Mm-hmm.
That would extend things a little bit, and give him a reason to try to find Kelly. So
I think
that's how I'm thinking it'll play out. So Kelly gets to go on location again to a train museum.
Mm-hmm.
The first time we saw her on location, assuming that helicopter in the first episode wasn't to location, was that harbor episode in the first few days when she and Peter were on the yacht and she spots Joe at the harbor. Then she gets a lovely desert location when she's being stalked by the Carnation Killer. And now train museum. Those are the three I can think of for her.
Well, I think we saw her outside when Joe and Peter had their altercation.
Oh, she went to the wildlife reserve at the end, So that's 4 for her.
Yeah.
Peter had harbor, wild animal park, and desert, so 3 for him. Joe had bus station, harbor, and wild animal park. I don't think he was in the desert.
Yeah.
Cruz did go to the abandoned trailer in the desert, and I have a memory of someone checking Peter's car. I think Cruz found the car that blew up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Cruz has...
starting at $199.95. Blowers also $199.95. And trimmers at only $169.95. Only at steel dealers find quality steel products at affordable prices. With over 1,000 authorized full-line dealers across Canada, it's easy to find expert advice, on-site service, and Canada's #1 selling brand of gas-powered equipment. Find yours today at Steel. Mature themes viewed.
Yeah, so Cruz had 2 locations in the desert. And then now Brandon has his first location shoot at the train museum.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all the ones I can think of that we've had. Ted and Warren got their location scenes during the earthquake. And I guess so did Lionel... No, Augusta, I think, was on a real road, whereas Lionel and Augusta were probably on a fake ledge. So, Ted, of course, has had 2 cave-ins. So he's got to catch up on cave-ins to meet Kelly's location count. Cruz, as you recall, was peering through a gap, and he didn't find the killer or evidence. He found Augusta.
I called it.
Santana, of course, immediately assumes that she's the killer. Cruz asks Augusta if she saw anyone else. Now, all of Augusta's dialogue was in French, and no idea what she said, and then she passes out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Santana, I think, thinks it through a little bit and thinks that maybe she's covering for Warren. But either way, she thinks Augusta blew up the tunnel.
Now, I would have thought Santana would have learned something about jumping to conclusions after she tried unsuccessfully to kill Joe, and then it turned out that Joe was not Channing's killer.
Because she actually said, on all this time I thought it was Joe.
Yeah. So, I think Cruz takes the better approach here of saying, well, let's just see how everything shakes out.
Mm-hmm. Cruz ends up telling Santana about Eden. And Santana says, oh, well, what does Cece think about that? He said, about the same as what he thought about you and Channing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jack Stanfield Lee is memorizing his fake report for the president for when he gets back from the East. He's memorizing names of various Middle Eastern sheikhs and things so that he can claim to have met all these people when he was over there. And Jack also wonders why the courier hasn't called in.
We see Parker in another weird quilted sort of bathrobe thingy.
Mm-hmm. Parker Simon says, I've got some word from New Staland. So now we know what New S stood for on those documents that Amy found in the trash. Not New Secretary, New Staland. What do you think New Staland is?
I don't know. I remember I thought it was perhaps New Surrogate, but I don't know what New Staland is, if it's maybe a company or a place or someone's name, maybe.
So Parker says they want that baby delivered in the next 2 weeks. Wow.
So it sounds like someone has this baby on order for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. There's a rush on it now.
Mm-hmm.
So they might, I don't know when Amy's due, they might try and rush that somehow. So either way, maybe we'll finally find out once that baby's born very quickly then, if they can push that.
Yeah, well, what the whole deal is, and we have to assume at this point that Amy was in some way artificially inseminated or something like that.
Mm-hmm. A way
how
that
happened.
something that she's not aware of, but that somehow Jeff figured out.
Yeah.
So, weird.
And speaking of weird, I mean, Jack is, again, just being weird in this episode, too.
He sure is acting a lot different than when he's, at work with Amy.
Yeah, or when he's, even if we think about him with Augusta, where he's, obviously sort of oozing insincerity, but at least he's sort of within a normal range of conversation. But in this, he's just very strange again.
Yeah, as if he's on drugs or something.
Yeah, and clearly, I don't know if he hasn't connected Kelly Capwell with his dear old friend CC, or if he just doesn't care or whatever. But
Sophia wonders who Lindsay is, and Eden says, "Oh, he must have something to do with Channing."
Mm-hmm. I think this gives us a little clue as to just how earth-shattering this could be when Lindsay's and Channing's secret is ultimately revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've seen Santana's passion for Channing, and still, having this impulse to jump up and get revenge on his killer. And of course, Eden and Sophia now are speculating about Lindsay as well. So it's going to be interesting.
Down in the dig, Warren hears tapping, and they break through a wall and find Gina and Ted.
Mm-hmm. Now,
once again, I think the logistics of this are kind of weird, because I thought they were digging towards Santana and Cruz. And when we saw the door to that sex room in previous episodes, Cruz was, way down the tunnel somewhere when he came upon it. So yet they're still at the bottom of the staircase that leads up to the study, and suddenly now the wall is the wall that has the door to that room. So that's very weird to me.
Yeah, I can't figure out quite where the room is and why.
If the camera angles are to be trusted from one episode to another, the door was there, and then the breaking through the wall was just over to the right of that wall where the door was. But then if that were the case, we would have seen the door in that tunnel. So unless somehow things shifted between episodes and the camera angle we were seeing was not that wall, but then it's kind of weird that Ted would be digging not near the door, that he would be digging against a wall. That wouldn't make any sense either. So, yeah, that's very weird that even if that room somehow were right next to that hallway, and the door to it was like, if you had to go all the way down the hallway, but then make a fast U-turn and come back down another hallway to lead to the door, I don't see why tunnel would be constructed that way, unless, had a lot of storage chambers in it for smuggling or something. But, yeah, if they had just, not shown the stairs being there, or taken that we're a third of the way through thing a little bit, to heart, and show that maybe they were digging in another direction. But yeah, very, very odd that is now where they found Ted and Gina, which is literally 6 feet from where Cruz and Santana should be. So,
yeah, I think in my head, just as I was picturing it, I thought Cruz and Jackie were off in this room somewhere, as you say, further down the hall. And I had pictured Cruz and Santana as being, if not at the base of the stairwell, then just a few feet past it.
Yeah, they were digging presumably back towards the stairs when they encountered Augusta. Augusta must be the closest to the bottom of the stairs of anyone, and yet she's not the first one they found. So, I don't know. I'm going to have to blame the director of that episode on that one.
Yeah, I don't know.
So they bring Gina and Ted up to the study, but then they bring up a body on a stretcher. Of course, it's Hank, but a lot of the people in the study don't know that. So Rosa obviously thinks, oh my God, it could be a Santana. And Eden thinks it's Cruz. And Lakin thinks it's Augusta. So it seems a bit of a, dick move not to quickly say, oh, by the way, that's Hank. Don't think it's one of the other. But then again, they don't know that anyone else is trapped down there, right?
Yeah.
They don't know that they're not the only ones that were being searched for. So
that's true.
I could see why they wouldn't say it right away.
And I think, Ted being passed out and presumably now will be taken to hospital gives Gina a little bit of an opportunity to create a story about why Hank's there and how she and Ted came down there together.
That's right, because she's got a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah.
As to that whole circumstance.
And now that she's got a little bag of pills, I noticed that she did become noticeably more functional and useful once she had a few of those pills in her. So she should be able to have the resources to make a much better story.
Gina's pretty good at coming up with stories quickly, but I can't imagine what it's going to be. And then I can imagine her racing off to the hospital to intercept Ted to say, okay, here's the story I told your dad. Can you just cover for that?
It'll be interesting for me to see, first of all, what condition Ted is in when he does come around, and just how much he's willing to corroborate Gina's story. If he just decides live and let live, if she's got to have that story and she keeps his dad happy,
and he
then
thinks, and he believes her story that she's kicked the pills.
Yeah, he might just be willing to let it go, because he's going to have other concerns between whatever disciplinary measures are going to come down on him and Mrs. Parks, I guess. And, I imagine he may have some interest in trying to reconcile with Lakin as well, and, plus bringing Sophia back into his life. By this time, of course, who knows what Kelly's situation will be, so that might be a whole other thing for everyone to worry about. And of course, they still have to find and identify Channing's killer, so there's a whole bunch of stuff there. He may really not be in a headspace to be worrying about Gina's issues.
Yeah, I guess he'll have at least a day or two in the hospital. Wonder if he'll be in that room on the right that Peter was in, or the one on the left that Kelly was in the second time.
Yeah.
Or that weird area where when they had half the cast in there that they had to open.
Well, there was the area where Frank was as well.
Yeah, that's that outside the swinging doors area. They'll probably be in one of the two main ones. Probably the right-hand one. Because that's where Kelly was the first time she was in the hospital. That's probably the go-to one. And that's it for this episode. We will be back after we watch episode 195 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Hank Judson was a small-time crook in Atlantic City who, along with his sidekick Gina Blake, worked as an enforcer for certain organizations. One of his operations caused the death of one of his victims, and he and Gina left town. Gina made her way west, eventually landing in Santa Barbara. But when Gina's sister Summer was killed, Hank was a suspect, which led him back into Gina's life. Throughout numerous physical attacks and extortion attempts, the odds on Hank Judson staying among the living went down by the second. It was not Gina or her new husband Cece that would bring about Hank's end, however. It was the actions of the mysterious gloved hand, who booby-trapped the secret tunnels with nitroglycerin, causing a tunnel collapse that trapped several people, but resulted in the death of only one, Hank Judson.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 195 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Wednesday, May 1st, 1985. Nick Hartley is the name of the photographer. Mm-hmm. He introduces himself to Kelly and suggests that they split up to search for Brandon. Brandon follows the dog into what looks like a power generating plant and gets into a room where the door closes and latches, but the latch is out of his reach. The dog goes up a spiral staircase, which I wonder if that's the same spiral staircase from that place Dominic and Joe used to meet all the time.
Yeah, it did look a little bit familiar, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. It was nice and shined up, though.
Yeah.
And the dog goes up there, and Brandon follows, and it looks to be a very steamy area. So I don't know if it's like a steam generator plant or something, but
it looks very industrial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it says warning danger all over the place, so I
Yeah.
assume there's electricity and steam that could injure them. Plus, now they're up there crawling up over planks, so now they're at risk of falling as well. So at one point he calls for Kelly, and Nick hears him outside, but he can't get in because the door's latched from the inside. So he sees a ladder and climbs up adjacent to the stack they're in, I guess, and sees Brandon through a window and smashes the window to get through to the other side. And rescues Brandon and the dog. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the courier sees Kelly all alone looking for Brandon and says, I saw a blonde boy in that train car over there. And tries to lead her away to an abandoned train car to kill her. Mm-hmm. But just at the nick of time, Nick Hartley calls, Kelly, I found him! And Kelly turns around and exits the train car. The courier kind of follows them back to the ranger station. And Nick mentions that he took a lot of photos of Kelly. And we see the courier thinking. So I'm thinking maybe she believes Nick may have caught her on film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that's probably the best explanation. Because I was a little puzzled by her expression. Because, it comes just after Brandon talks about how famous CC is. And so at one point I thought, well, maybe this is actually a higher stakes killing than she thinks. But she wasn't intimidated at all about working her way into Cece's house. So I think you've got a more logical explanation.
So Nick offers to walk Kelly and Brandon out, and the courier stays behind in the ranger station. The ranger we saw briefly has gone, so maybe she'll break into the dark room and wreck all the film.
Yeah.
Cruz and Santana are still trapped in a tunnel, and Cruz tells Santana all about Brandon's life since she's been gone. And they talk about when they were in high school and how their parents wanted them to get married, and Santana went out to all of Cruz's games, but he probably didn't even notice her, and he says he did notice her. They also mentioned that there appears to be oxygen getting in from somewhere. Well, air, so... Mason reveals to everyone in the study that it's Hank Judson under the sheet, so they breathe a sigh of relief.
Nobody cares about Hank Judson.
No.
Cece is just like, yeah, well, whatever, get him out of here.
Most of the family ends up going to the hospital with Ted and Gina, but Lakin stays behind, chooses to wait for Augusta rather than to go with Ted. So Eden, Brick, Lionel, and Warren are digging at the base of the staircase, as far as I can tell. And they break through and send in Eden, who's the smallest, and she passes Augusta lying there and sees Santana passed out on Cruz's chest, which looks like it annoys her a little bit. They get everyone pulled out. Augusta is taken to the hospital. Santana's kind of just lying there in the study. Cruz is conscious, and then Eden is jealous when she spots Cruz stroking Santana's hair. And Carmen Castillo arrives out of nowhere and says they've got to go to the hospital with Santana.
Yeah.
And Cruz says, well, I've got to go there to question Augusta. So they leave. Eden's not too happy about that. A nurse checks out Gina. Cece arrives, briefly asks about the baby, and then asks why Gina was in the tunnel.
Yeah.
And she says that Hank tried to blackmail her again. He said, well, I thought we had that settled. He said, I had a friend who would be willing to testify that I tried to run him over. So. Then he pulled one of your guns out of the drawer and forced me into the tunnel. Why was Ted there? Well, he must have followed us. He was really brave. He he wrestled with Hank and saved my life. So I think she spun it not too bad, because Ted probably can't really counter most of the Hank-related stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was very quick thinking. Now, judging by the look on Cece's face after, she gives her story, I'm not entirely sure he was convinced of it. He seemed to be kind of looking at her and wondering what to make of it all. I thought, yeah.
I think he's going to quiz Ted next. And
I think so.
I guess he'll find that it kind of jigsaw puzzle pieces in with what Gina said, but that there's a gap in Ted's knowledge there that's unexplained. So
yeah, I mean, it was really nice that she gave Ted the props for, trying to rescue her, which he did, in fact, in real life do. So that was really nice. But yeah, I think there's going to be some gaps there as well.
Then a homicide detective arrives to question Gina. And Cece said, "What case is this for?" And he says he can't tell Cece. And Cece accepts that very readily, unexpectedly, because he never accepts anything.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting, because I didn't get a sense from this very brief little scene with the homicide detective that he was necessarily associated with Cruz. So I don't know. We just have to find out a little bit more.
If it's not Channing's homicide, does he think Hank was killed? Is it something from back east?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That we don't even know about. Or that we do know about, but now Gina's, been fingered.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be just because Gina has now married Cece Capwell. The downside of that might be that she's suddenly a lot more prominent than she was.
Maybe someone in New Jersey saw her in the paper.
Yeah.
Lakin enters Ted's hospital room. He's in the room on the right that Peter previously has had, and Kelly had at one point. Joe died there, I think. Anyway, she enters just in time to see Jackie kissing Ted on the forehead, but she doesn't freak out like she previously would have.
She doesn't look happy, though.
No.
I think that, whatever bit of warmth there was between the two of them in the height of the crisis, which we talked about last time, I think this has probably evaporated a little bit. And I have to say, as I always do when it comes to Jackie Parks, I just can't quite get at what she's thinking. I mean, she's already on very thin ice at the school she's at. And now here she is. She shows up at Ted's house. Now, of course, that was for the meeting, I assume, with Cece. But, she follows him to the hospital. She's, kissing his forehead in the hospital room. It's just, she doesn't seem to, apart from anything else, she just doesn't seem to have a lot of sense as a teacher.
Now, Mrs. Lambie never did show up. But when they were digging yesterday, they said it had been an hour and a half. We know the explosion was at 9:48, so 10:48, 11:20. It's possible it's not 1 o'clock yet. That all this stuff has happened, and that she's just showing up now after everyone's abandoned the mansion. So Ted says the only time he felt happy was when he was with Lakin. And Lakin says that she was holding a grudge, and she felt that she could keep changing her mind because he'd always be there. And then she says, "I'm so ashamed," and rushes out.
Yeah.
So, even though she mentions that she had planned to talk to Ted that day, she doesn't actually have the talk with him now and rushes out.
She did kind of pave the way for the talk, though. So, they are, I think, at least talking to each other again. And
he says he was thinking about her when he was down in the pit. So,
yeah.
Cruz says that Augusta's the only person with no reason to have been in that tunnel. And then Lionel says, well, you set a trap that almost killed everyone except the killer.
That's a good point.
And Lakin says, what reason would she have? And then Cruz says, well, Channing was holding a lot of things on a lot of people. And Warren accuses Cruz by saying Cece just wants to hang this on a Lockridge. And Lionel says, are you auditioning for son-in-law?
Which was a clever little comeback, too.
I think they probably all know about Cruz and Eden by now.
Plus, I don't think Cruz is necessarily right in his assertion that Augusta is the only one who doesn't have a reason to be down there. I mean, the tunnel is connected with her house. She could be down there. Why not?
The doctor says Augusta had a nasty blow to the head and also got some scratches on her cornea, so he tells him not to freak out. She'll need to keep her eyes bandaged for a couple of days. So this is convenient. Augusta has to have the bandage over her eyes so she can't tell when Lionel is in her room.
Yeah.
So every time Warren or one of the others is in there, Lionel sneaks in there to peek at Augusta. He asks the doctor not to mention it to Augusta, and he says, "Oh, I think there's no problem with telling you everything about her condition." Nowadays, of course, that would probably be illegal.
Yeah.
Cruz questions Augusta, and she says that she was just worried that there was evidence planted by Sophia that might implicate Warren. And she said if it had implicated Lionel, she would have gladly turned it in.
So she's still annoyed with Lionel. Yeah.
So Cruz buys this, and he and Maggie talk about it and end up concluding that the killer wouldn't have had time to escape, so if it wasn't Augusta, then there must be another corpse down there. So there's excitement of finding another person in that rubble.
Or will we?
Cruz calls the Capwell house and to tell Eden that he'll be back in 10 minutes. But the fire chief talks to him about something first, and by the time the call ends, Eden has left. She's given up waiting and gone to the houseboat. So at the houseboat, she finds the ring and decides to fight Santana for Cruz. So this may be the main reason they brought Santana back at this time.
I think that, I just think it creates an interesting dynamic in so many ways, as we've already talked about. Of course, it does create this interesting dynamic between Eden and Cruz. But we could see that, Cece was also struck by the fact that Santana had come back, and Mason, of course, is very excited about it. Gina's not going to be that happy about it, I should think, so that creates an interesting dynamic there.
Yeah, she will have a lot of storyline.
And as we explore Channing's murder, that adds a whole extra dimension as well.
Cruz returns to the Capwell mansion, and the fire chief comes up and says, "You won't believe what we found." And he says, "Was it another body?" And they say, "No, another passage." And then they point towards the camera, this big area that I had said yesterday. I wonder if there's a tunnel in that direction that leads to the gazebo. Well, guess what? It leads to the gazebo. And Cruz realizes that the killer could easily have escaped the explosion if they had run in that direction.
And he actually makes a very interesting comment at this point. He said, the people who were trapped in the tunnel are probably the ones who weren't really involved in the murder, in a way that actually absolves Augusta and Santana and Tad and those who were trapped in there.
Yeah. He and Maggie are chatting at the gazebo, and Mason shows up, says, "Oh, I saw you here from the study window." So I'm really trying to get a handle on what the orientation of the study is, because when we see people going into the study, they always go to the back of the main atrium, then they go left, and of course then they vanish out of sight. And then when we cut to the corridor with the study in it, which is on the right, they come from the right and around a corner. And the most logical way, assuming no other corners, is that the study is actually right next to the front entrance, with the window facing out into the driveway. But now we find that the only window in the study that we know about faces the gazebo. So there could be another window on the fourth wall of the study, I suppose.
It does point to the fact, I assume this passage was very well hidden, because Cruz has spent whole nights down there. Sergeant Gillis spent whole nights down there. So I'm assuming it must be very well hidden, which indicates that the killer was someone who knew those tunnels extremely well.
Well, maybe those tunnels were designed to confuse people, and maybe that explains why that chamber with Ted and Gina was literally right next to the stairs, but yet the door was, quite a few paces, down one tunnel and back up another, probably. just to make it confusing, I guess.
Yeah, if they had been designed, to smuggle alcohol during the Prohibition era, then perhaps they were designed that even if the tunnel was discovered and, it was excavated in a police raid or something, that there might still be rooms or passageways where at least some of the liquor could be stored and maybe not discovered.
Mm-hmm. So they basically talk about the fact that the killer may well have been in the study with them and been helping with the digging.
Yeah.
And that is all that happened in this episode. So we will be back after we watch episode 196 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 196, original air date Thursday, May 2nd, 1985. And this evening we saw Ian Abercrombie on Dragnet. He, of course, plays Philip, the Capwell butler.
Or he did.
Or he did. Hasn't been mentioned in a while. He didn't help drive anyone around to the hospital or anything.
Mm-hmm.
The courier lurks as Brandon takes photos of Nick. So, the courier's still hanging out at that ranger station while Kelly's gone off to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Then later, when Nick is looking at his photographs, he spots something odd in one of them. And then I think he actually blows up a different one. Or maybe it's a blow-up, that same one. Maybe that's what it is. And gets out a magnifying glass and sees Kelly's head. And in the corner is a newspaper with a gun in it.
It actually reminds me of that very influential movie Blow Up from the 1960s about a photographer who accidentally gets footage of a murder.
I've never seen that. That sounds like they may have ripped it off from this. Or this may have ripped it off from that.
Mm-hmm.
Another telegram arrives for Jackie. Larry's plane has crashed, and he's missing. So the extremely long death of Larry Parks continues. We're into his third month of predicting he's about to die.
For all that, I have to admit, I really have a hard time caring about Jackie.
Larry's only been in 4 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we saw him was, I think, the day Joe died. Maybe the day after. Or the day after Joe was shot was the day Joe died. So it's been a while since Larry's been off the canvas, but not off our hearts. Out of our hearts. Well, Jackie.
Still there, and still being like the third worst teacher we've seen. I guess Peter Flint was worse. And Mr. Bottomley wasn't any great shakes either, so...
We imagine at some point Mrs. Lambie was a teacher before she moved up into administration, so we've only seen her the once. She hasn't shown up yet for her meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she ran into those Russians and got kidnapped. Okay. Ted and Santana get released from the hospital, so they get dressed to go in their separate rooms. Santana in the room on the left. No, she must be in one of the behind rooms, because Augusta's in the room on the left, and Ted's in the room on the right. In Ted's room, Ted gets dressed behind a curtain, and Gina just goes ahead and tells Cece that she knows that Brandon is Channing and Santana's son. And Ted pops his head up from behind the screen.
Ted's actually going to be in for a kind of shocking day, I think.
Mm-hmm. Channing-related shocks throughout. Cece is angry. A little bit angry that Gina splurted that out right in front of Ted. He's still trying to keep everything a secret. And
sort of in the middle of a hospital room while they're trying to take Ted home. Like, it's not this nice, quiet, private moment, in some dimly lit corner of the Capwell mansion. It's right in the middle of a hospital room while they're in the process of transporting Ted.
Mm-hmm. And as usual, Gina quickly deflects Cece's anger against someone else. She says, Eden told me to try to hurt me. She doubles down on that. Cece then wonders who told Eden.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Cece goes into his, well, I will never forgive Eden. Eden will be punished kind of mode.
Mm-hmm. Gina takes the time to wonder if he really loves her or just wanted to adopt Brandon, but Cece assures her that he does love her. But they did talk about the fact that the adoption paperwork is not final.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how Cece feels after he signed the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
He finds out his wife's a pill addict. And isn't
Among
really
other
pregnant with
things.
his baby.
And remember, was, for whatever reason, questioned by some homicide detectives in the last
That's right.
episode.
Now, she may be pregnant with Hank's baby, depending on what happened in that room before Ted arrived, or the other day, or the previous meeting. So that could get her out of that problem.
Possibly, yeah.
For a while. Before Santana manages to leave the hospital, she's accosted by Gina, who is very angry at her for hiding the truth from her. Back in Nice, of course, she says, "Oh, he pretended to be my friend and just wanted to see Brandon."
Yeah, I can see why Gina would feel a little unsettled about that. That wasn't really very nice.
So Santana says that she didn't come back to get Brandon, and Gina's like, "Oh yeah, you got that right. You're never going to see Brandon."
Yeah.
Takes Santana a bit aback, I think. But then, while she's on a roll, Gina tells Eden that Cece is furious with her for revealing Brandon's secret. Cece shows up and tells Eden that he can't trust her anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also one of those conversations where it's like Cece's going, "Oh well, we're going to talk about this more when we get home."
I've got several things I need to ask you when we get back to the mansion. Little does he know, Eden has other plans.
Yeah, Eden, as we'll see as we continue to talk about this episode, actually, I would almost say she blows this off. Like, she definitely has other priorities. And in a way, I think this shows huge growth and maybe what a good effect Cruz has had on Eden. That, in previous times, she was sort of a daddy's girl, and I think this would have been a huge issue, whereas with this one, she just kind of keeps going with her own plans.
Yeah, I think she's gotten a little insight into Cece recently, and that's helped her kind of stop idolizing him a bit too. So,
well, I think this very controversy, which Cece is currently so upset about, which is the whole thing around Brandon's parentage, I think has definitely made Eden see Cece in a very different light, in the fact that he has kept this secret.
And before Santana can leave the hospital, she's also visited by Mason. She asks how Cece is, and Mason says, "Worse than ever." And then Mason remembers the tape and rushes home.
Now, I think Ava Lazur had a very great knack for kind of rolling her eyes whenever Mason was in the vicinity, which the new one hasn't quite got the note of contempt that the first Santana had, but I think she'll get there.
So basically everyone heads to the mansion. They don't even arrive in the same order that they left the hospital. Brandon finds out that Santana is leaving and begs Gina to ask Santana to stay. Meanwhile, Mason's hanging around for his chance to go upstairs and grab the tape. And tells Santana not to leave on his account. And then he says, "Can you forgive me for the way I acted the last time we were together?" Which was super rapey and super blackmail-y.
Yeah, that was not good. That was Mason in a very dark place.
So she says, maybe, given time. It's not an unreasonable answer, I think. And then she apologizes for the way she treated him, which probably wasn't necessary. And he says, "I forgive you." So it's half resolved.
I guess so.
Cece brings Ted home, and tells him that he could stay in Cece's bed. There's a TV in that room. You can watch TV to your heart's content.
Now, it occurs to me this seems to perhaps be the only TV in the entire Capwell mansion.
I think it's the only one we've ever seen.
Yeah.
One time Callie was listening to the news, but it was on a radio, I think. She was listening to music that one day. We saw a lot of TVs on the morning after the earthquake, was it? When everyone was watching or something.
Of course, Kelly might have taken a TV with her to her apartment.
Well, it's all Sally's stuff in there.
Well, that's true.
Sally's living in an empty shell of a place down by the beach. Waiting for a tsunami to take her away. So Ted turns on the TV and, hey, what's Mason doing on my TV? Hey, Dad, you're probably surprised to see me on your television. And apparently Ted watches the whole tape. And we see as he turns it off, Mason's face is on the screen, so he must have recorded a closing to the whole thing as well, which we never have heard. It's probably much more offensive than the opening even. So, how could you? Is a very Ted-like phrase for Todd McKee to say. And Mason says, I had changed my mind. I wasn't going to let Dad see it. I certainly didn't expect you were going to see it. So Ted says that it's obviously all fate. And Mason says, well, I could introduce you to Lindsay. It's probably about time you met him. So Ted ends up pushing Mason across the room and kind of scuffles with him. Cece comes running in, breaks it up, and takes Ted out of the room for some reason. Probably just to give Mason an opportunity to take that tape back.
Yeah.
So ends up stuffing it in his pants because none of his pockets are big enough. And then Ted and Cece argue about Channing's killer and about how Cece kind of made the whole family think it was Joe Perkins, and then Ted's upset that he was suspecting Warren for so long after that, and he really blames Cece for messing everyone up with all of his own suspicions and prejudices. And he also says that he no longer thinks Channing is that perfect.
So this even though he was in shock, I think, over this tape, I think it really did have an influence on his thinking as well.
Cece says, because of Santana? That was just a fling, and he did the right thing by sending her to have the baby adopted out by someone else. And he says, no, it's because of something else I witnessed, but I'm not going to be the one to tell you.
Plus, Ted does actually call him out on the Santana thing, too, and says, well, no, that was you.
That was you, yeah.
So that was nice to see.
Yeah, so, Ted is very upset that his brother was gay, which in 1985, I guess, was a reaction that was a bit more common than it would be now. I mean, we've already seen Mason be very hateful towards Channing over that, and we just assume Cece will be. But it's a shame that Ted immediately thought less of Channing because of, they would have been private photos. There wouldn't have been anything necessarily that Channing was doing in those photos that was evil, So.
I think it's worth remembering that back in the early and mid-'80s that being gay was still technically illegal in some jurisdictions, I think. And they certainly didn't have gay marriage or anything like that. And, I think as we've noted before, there were a lot of public figures who were quite obviously gay who were not out of the closet, or if they did try and push the envelope a little, might admit to being bisexual, but they wouldn't necessarily, or experimenting, but they wouldn't necessarily admit to being gay. So
it's kind of what's Lindsay's doing with all of his protestations that he's dated a lot of girls and he's marrying a woman, which, thinking about that from today's eyes, or even then, it's pretty likely Lindsay's either fooling himself or just trying to fool everyone else at this point. So,
just thinking, I think Elton John was still married to a woman at this time, or just recently gotten divorced. And I think Boy George was busy claiming to be bisexual. I don't think Freddie Mercury was anywhere near out of the closet. I don't think he ever did publicly acknowledge that. Rock Hudson, who, would probably die of AIDS, probably within a short time frame of this episode, I don't think ever publicly admitted to his preferences. So there's a lot of secrecy at this point. This series is actually fairly daring in many ways.
I mean, at this time, when actors die, they would often list the cause of death as, pneumonia or something like that, which was actually brought on by AIDS, but they wouldn't list it as the cause of death, and so they would cover that up even after the fact.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be something that hits Santa Barbara later this year, which we'll talk about when that happens.
We'll probably be talking about that this year.
Mm-hmm. Eden leaves a note on Cruz's houseboat door, and she leaves a second note at the hospital for him, and pops by the mansion and asks Santana when she's leaving. Santana says she's not really in competition for Cruz, but Eden's face doesn't really show that. But she does leave Cruz's third note with Santana. So that's interesting, because her plan could be totally thwarted if Santana really was after Cruz.
Yeah.
So Cruz follows the trail of notes and ends up at the theater that we've seen a few times before. And he finds the next note in a bag of popcorn. And that leads him out into the wilderness. New location to shoot for Cruz and Eden. That leads him to a horse, which he rides up a trail, finds another couple notes, and then he sees Eden off in a clearing, or down in a clearing. She's at a table with a tablecloth, and she's in a gown. And at some point, he changed into a tuxedo.
That was at the when he actually had to pick up the tuxedo at the dry cleaner and change into that.
Oh, I totally blanked out on that.
That was one of his instructions. That was one of his notes.
Well, I was probably typing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, he goes down there, and she's got two servers, all in a black tuxedo, and they pour champagne, and he finds the engagement ring at the bottom of the glass. And he tries it on his finger and says, "It doesn't fit me." He puts it on her finger, and she asks him to marry her.
Of course, throughout this whole scene, we're hearing music in the background, and this is the same theme I think we've heard throughout whenever we've had romantic scenes with Cruz and Eden.
It's the instrumental version of The Change in Me As You, or maybe there's an instrumental portion of it that they just focus on sometimes. And we don't hear Cruz's answer because the camera pulls back slowly across the clearing up the hill.
And then we hear some even more familiar music.
The closing credits.
The closing credits.
And they are played not over one of our usual scenes, but they're played over a long shot of Cruz and Eden at the table. Mm-hmm. So that's fun, and one of the few alternate credits sequences that we've had so far. And I remembered another location shoot that we hadn't remembered when we were listing who got the most location shoots. When Peter kidnapped Eden. They were in that underpass area. And so that would have been them, and I think Cruz shows up at the end of that. Mm-hmm. So the tally on who's had the most location shoots might actually be Peter at this point. Mm-hmm. So, and that's it for the Thursday episode. Anything else you wanted to mention?
No, not that I can think of, but I'm looking forward to the next episode, which I'm sure will have a really interesting Friday cliffhanger.
I think my theory that Nick would come barging into the Capwell mansion with his photos, "Look, someone's trying to kill you," was spot on. So I assume we'll see that today.
Yeah, and I'm actually really looking forward to when we finally do the sort of Hercule Poirot, everyone in the study, big reveal. And, I think we're really building up to something like that. I think there's going to be a lot more curiosity in Lindsay than there was even the last time we had this. So that'll be interesting. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more to digest, now that the tunnel's had its collapse and we know a little bit more about how the killer got in and out.
And Larry may actually die tomorrow, or be at least reported dead. He may already be dead.
Yeah.
He's probably already dead. But oh, we found his parachute. So, Jeff just died a couple days ago, so we might have to visit Santa Barbara Cemetery for a couple more times in the near future.
Yeah.
So we'll be back after we watched episode 197 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, it's safe now. And it's got a great popcorn machine.
Welcome back!
Hello.
We finished episode 197 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, May 3rd, 1985.
Yes.
And we pick up where we left off, Cruz and Eden in a clearing at a table. Cruz and Eden get engaged.
It's very romantic. They both ask each other to marry them.
It looks like they kick off the piano player and the waiter at one point, because we see them dancing in the clearing and there's no one else there. Eden mentions that she told Gina about Brandon's true parents, and then Gina told on her to get her in trouble.
And, to Eden's credit, she says to Cruz, you were right. You have every right to say I told you so.
Yeah. And Eden wonders how she's going to talk to Cece, both, I guess, about that and the wedding. And Cruz says, we're a team now, we'll tell them together.
Yeah.
When in fact, later on, it's just Eden, it turns out. And the Capwells are drinking wine from the Capwells' own vineyards. Apparently, they also are in the wine business.
Yeah, we've heard of another industry that the Capwells are involved with.
Yep, Cece mentioned something about gross tonnage per acre or something of grapes. So now they've got oil, hotels, and grapes that we know of.
I sort of imagine they're manufacturing plonk, though, because really their main business is oil. So I can't really see them as being fine wine connoisseurs.
That could be. Kelly is pretty annoyed with Cece since he's now chased away all of her siblings.
And is not getting along with Marcello either.
Kelly and Marcello end up visiting the yacht, which Kelly says she used to enjoy going to, but she ends up having flashbacks of her and Peter on the yacht. So Marcello noticed this is that, and she says, someplace just trigger these memories. She says to Marcello that he's the only man she doesn't fear. And Marcello says, well, eventually, he'll be able to trust other people.
I was thinking to myself, eventually she'll fear Marcello too.
Oh, we may have another candidate for Kelly's Psycho Gazebo. Let's just see how crazy he gets. Because when she leaves the room, he looks around and concludes that the yacht would be a fine place to honor the anniversary of his parents' death on May the 20th. Cruz and Eden set a date for their wedding, May the 20th.
Which I assume is also right in the sweet spot of sweeps as well.
So what do you think Marcello's plan is?
Well, he's interested in the yacht, and he wants revenge on CC. So I'm wondering if perhaps he's thinking of luring CC at all onto the yacht and then blowing it up or something like that.
I mean, he was kind of looking into cubby holes and seeing how much space there was under different things, so I too got the vibe of someone looking for a good place to hide a bomb.
Yeah.
Maybe a first-to-tape VCR. It comes on with the tape, just like Mason. It's like, hey, by the way, I didn't forgive you. I'm going to blow you up now.
Yeah.
So, so that's...
So we've got a lot to look forward to over the next few weeks. A wedding, as far as we know, a wedding. Possibly a funeral, or at least we'll see what comes of
another massive explosion.
Marcello's revenge. But we also have to untangle Channing's murder as well.
Yeah, May's just barreling along like a freight train.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, this wedding is going to mess up Marcello's plans because, Cece's going to be pretty busy on May the 20th. Is he going to if he gets a note that says, come to the yacht, is he going to say, I don't have time for this?
Well, I have faith that Marcello can improvise, and I'm thinking Marcello might step in and say, hey, let's have this wedding reception on the yacht.
And blow it up with every Capwell in the world on it.
Yeah, that's what I would do if I were Marcello looking for revenge.
Even Kelly?
She's killed Joe already, so...
I kind of thought in the back of my head that there might be, as these recent episodes were happening, that maybe there was going to be some other event on May the 20th. But I had it in my head that it was going to be the opening of the Orient Express.
Mm-hmm.
So, but maybe I had in the back of my head there's some sort of event. So maybe it is the wedding that I actually had in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really think of it until just recently it came to me.
Now, I'm also thinking that, in true soap opera fashion, I don't think they would suddenly resolve all of these stories and then just have everything get along nicely afterwards. I'm sure that whatever happens on May 20th will lead to something else, or there'll be a few storylines we're following that aren't quite resolved on May 20th.
Well, after May 20th, I pretty much remember nothing of the following months. So, I remember some of the new characters that get introduced later in the year, but sort of in between bits, no memory.
It'll be new to you then.
Mm-hmm. Nick Hartley visits Cruz on his houseboat, and it turns out though they know each other from when they worked for the super secret spy agency together, as Nick calls it, Mother Goose. Sort of reminds me of the Avengers when they talk about who their bosses are.
And I thought Cruz had very much the same style of camaraderie with Nick that he used to have with Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was thinking of that too.
Sort of a guy friend vibe he has.
It's interesting that I didn't have any memory of any of Cruz's former spy friends ever showing up. So this has actually surprised me that they knew each other. And they talk about how Nick was drummed out of the service because he was the only one who thought something was going to happen, and then it actually did happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking he must have gotten drummed out not for correctly predicting something was going to happen, but for acting without orders to prevent it. So Cruz says, Nick tells Cruz, now I just take photos of families and things. So then he says, the reason I came to you is because it's a crazy story, and I know you'd believe me. I think someone's trying to kill this girl that was at the train park a few days ago, he says, which is actually a shocker to me because it should either still be the same day or most of the next day.
Yeah, that's what I think so too.
Especially if he's A, just developing the pictures, and B, he wants to stop a murderer. Why would he wait a few days? So it's kind of weird. Although I guess until he really looked at the photos, maybe he didn't know there was a murderer. But still, I think he kind of liked Kelly. He probably would have gotten those pictures developed as soon as possible. So I don't know about that. I don't know about it being a few days. So Nick doesn't know the girl's name, and the photos are still drying at his place. That's why he didn't bring any of them to Cruz's place. And so they go over there to the train park dark room, I guess. Unless Nick's darkroom is totally in a different place.
It's sort of hard to tell.
Yeah, I kind of assumed he had a special area in the train park. There's a bright room and a dark room.
Mm-hmm.
And all the photos have been stolen by the time they get there, and the negatives, and everything.
Yeah.
None of the equipment, so they know it's not like a thief. They know it's targeted. And once again, Cruz blows off something that's clearly problematic and says, it's probably nothing. It's like, I saw a gun. Oh, sure, it was a gun. So, several times now, Cruz has said, this is probably nothing, and then it's turned out to be something very dangerous. But at least, the guy, Nick mentions that the girl's name was Kelly, and the boy wasn't her son, but his name was Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
So at least Cruz says, hey, I know who that is. It's Kelly Capwell.
Yeah.
So Cruz says, just forget about it, and leaves. And Nick, thankfully, using his that same spidey sense he used when he was in the Secret Service, says, I'm going to go warn that girl. So he shows up at the Capwell mansion, and Kelly's kind of not too freaked out to see him. But he immediately starts talking about, I think someone's trying to kill you, and she really freaks out from that. Mm-hmm. Says, no, I'm perfectly fine, closes the door, and then locks this latch we've never seen before way at the top, so that he can't even come in. So I think she's freaked out probably by her overall day of having flashbacks on Peter and not just that single encounter.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. She got very triggered on the yacht and was really freaked out over just all of the things that were reminding her of Peter. And I just don't think this was a really good day for Kelly, mental health-wise. So I think that was part of the reaction.
It wasn't the best day to find out someone's trying to kill you.
But, I agree with you about Cruz's reaction. Not only because, as you say, this guy has already been proved right, and we've got a lot of things now that looked improbable that actually did happen. Mm-hmm. But, when you think about it, Kelly is the daughter of, like, a billionaire. So I would think in a normal circumstance, there would be a lot of threats to her life.
Or, just because the person has a gun.
Yeah.
The most logical conclusion is, someone's trying to kidnap Kelly again for ransom.
Yeah, and
right?
It's not like it hasn't happened before.
Yeah.
So I would have taken that a little more seriously, I think.
Maybe Cruz is really just focused on Eden today.
I think so, and, as he does say to Nick, he does have a lot on his plate, having reopened the Channing murder. And also, what this little assignment he's been given by Brick, too, which I think he has mentioned at some point that he's also looking into.
I think he told Nick, just report it to the police.
Yeah. Having said that, I did wonder why Nick didn't just phone Cruz.
I don't know. Just wanted to see his old friend.
Yes, but if, then he could have kept his eye on his photos and told Cruz what was going on and enticed him to come over.
Yeah, it's interesting because from the photos that he did print, we only ever see the hand. So we don't see the courier's face. So he wouldn't have put that together with the woman that was hanging around after they'd found Brandon. Otherwise, he definitely would have realized he was in trouble. Although he does say, I think I'm in trouble at one point.
Yeah. I would have thought, too, Cruz sort of blows it off and says, hey, you know what, it was probably just a toy gun. But I would think that if Nick had been serving in some kind of secret service or whatever, he would be able to recognize a real gun.
I think Nick actually says that at some point. Well, anyway, I'm sure Nick won't just let it drop. He's probably hiding in the bushes, ready to pounce on whoever shows up with a gun. So.
And, we do know that he has a similar kind of background and training to Cruz, so I think he'll probably be able to take care of himself. Might even be able to afford Kelly some real protection if he's not put off.
Brick gets the autopsy report and finds out that Jeff was strangled. And also that he was sterile. That's a thorough autopsy.
I was almost wondering if maybe he had a vasectomy or something, and that would be something they would find evidence of, because I don't know.
That's not really what sterile means, though.
No, I don't know how that.
Yeah, and it's like you're trying to find someone's cause of death. That seems to be a really thorough autopsy.
I don't even know how you find that.
Unless, in a deleted scene, in an unseen scene, Brick said, by the way, when you're asking for a copy of the autopsy from me, can you ask them to make sure he was sterile? Jackie has been on hold with the Navy and finally gets through to someone and they won't tell her anything. She's like, I'm not a Russian spy. So she ends up, leaving Brick and going to the State Street Saloon, where she meets Ted, who's sitting at a table trying to reach Lakin. He actually phones the hospital or phones home and realizes, she's at the hospital with Augusta. That makes sense. So he kind of inches over to Jackie's table. He says, looks like they didn't fire you. So that's good. But then he ends up joining her at the table and telling her all his troubles with Lakin, the sort of truncated conversation that they had yesterday. Although it seemed generally positive to me, the conversation with Lakin. I don't know why he's so downhearted by it. Then later, when he's getting a drink from the bar, Jade comes in. Yay! And
Jade is looking more like a Motley Crue groupie.
Yeah, she could be in a rock video.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a possible job for her. She says, "I thought you weren't seeing Jackie anymore." Ted says, "I'm not seeing her. We're just sitting there together, talking." Okay. And Jade mentions that the contents of Jackie's telegram, and Ted's like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that. Here I am telling her all my troubles." So he invites Jackie over to his apartment, his and Mason's apartment, he says, but, chances are Mason won't be there. He says, "Oh, we have a popcorn maker now." She readily accepts, and Mason isn't there. He's left a note saying, "Out chasing ambulances and other sirens." Another great line from Mason. He wasn't even there. So they say, "Oh, good, we'll have the place to ourselves." And then they put on some music, which unfortunately the copyright holder has reported to YouTube.
Yeah.
And the entire segment of the scene, the whole rest of the scene, is blanked out sound-wise because to overlap the song. And found a Russian version that's also missing the song. And so we have no idea what they talked about, but they end up deciding to dance to the music, and we see Jackie crying. So clearly she's pretty sure that Frank is dead.
Now, if I were someone who had control over the remotes, I would probably just fast forward over every scene with Jackie, because I find her that irritating and uninteresting. But anyway, here we are. So basically she's not fired yet. She probably will be fired and disgraced soon after she and Ted sleep together. And this will torpedo Ted's attempts to get back to Lake. And
the good thing is it will maybe torpedo Ted's offers at Harvard and Stanford, which would mean he'll stay in Santa Barbara, where, as a character on the show, we kind of expect him to be.
Yes, that's true. I'm sure, though, that Jade is Team Lakin and will definitely let Lakin know what Ted is up to, just in the very short term.
Yeah, she's already witnessed enough from just the State Street Saloon scene.
So this will boomerang. I don't know. That's how I expect the story to go.
I think something will collapse in the next few days.
Yeah.
Eden shows Rosa the ring, and she gets congratulated by Rosa. Then Cece shows up and confronts her about telling Gina about Brandon, and Eden says, "You know what? I'd do it again." And she said, "Gina's been really mean to me."
Yeah.
And then she says, "Did Mason tell you?" He goes, "No, it was Cruz, my fiance." So this diverts Cece's attention to something else to hate, and he's, it seems awful quick. You're not very serious.
Says the guy who just married Gina overnight, basically.
Yeah. So she's...
After having his fling with Santana.
And she says, "Mexican?" No, that's not what I was thinking. So anyway, they kind of hug, but Cece's got that let's get him look that he had when Joe Perkins was around. So.
Well, I think that Eden really owns Cece in this conversation. Mm-hmm. And I do think she and Cruz definitely have whatever it takes to own whatever Cece's thinking of. I think Gina was really anticipating that Eden was going to get into trouble, but Eden really held her own against Cece and really threw a lot back at him too. And, even said, she was actually getting more and more sympathetic towards Mason because that's just where Cece goes whenever he's upset.
And Cece never apologizes for any of his things,
no.
Or never truly does. He doesn't really change his mind, even if he apologizes for something. And he's going to be unhappy with Channing soon too, so he'll have ostracized all of his kids, even the deceased one.
Yeah.
Gina tries to get Cece to have sex with her, and he turns her down, and he has other things to do. But then somehow she manages to turn the conversation around and get him to come upstairs with her. Finally, after all this time, she has a chance of maybe getting pregnant. Although,
now, her timeline is getting pretty tight for this, I would say.
Yeah. She hid her pregnancy test in Mason's bathroom. And she tells Cece she wants to redecorate that wing of the house. And he says, "Oh, I haven't been there in years. That's where Channing's room is." But, of course, he has been there briefly, right after Joe Perkins broke in there. He and Philip were in there, checking to see if anything was missing. Or he and Mason were. Maybe he and Philip were there in the flashback from 6 years ago. But definitely, a few minutes in there. But I never got the sense that that wing was a different area from where his bedroom is, because I always thought his bedroom was the first one on the right, and then the second one on the right, from our right, is Kelly's, and across from Kelly's is Channing's. But maybe there's a whole other hallway around another corner from where Cece is, where the kids' bedrooms are. All these hallways look alike to me, so maybe a proper study of them would show that they actually are meant to be longer and longer hallways. But it seems like it's just a 2-story house, so it's a lot of stuff going on upstairs, I guess, over top of this big atrium. And the kitchen that we've only seen a tiny corner of, and this living room and other room that have a window that shows stuff outside. So I don't know what this upstairs is over top of, when the downstairs has got a finite, defined size. There's been this, I discovered online, there's this, I think it's an architect or a realtor or something, who's doing 3D walkthroughs of famous sitcom sets. And I just watched the 2-part Bewitched one, and I don't know if they're a fan of Santa Barbara, but it'd be interesting to see someone do a virtual walkthrough of the Santa Barbara house. And the important thing they try to do is figure out how the layouts of the various floors fit over top of each other and with the exterior of the house. So
it would be neat
fun
to see a layout of the Capwell house, the Lockridge house, and the tunnel. That would be interesting.
We keep seeing new pieces of the Lockridge house. And, it's always a problem when you have an exterior window from an exterior establishing shot. It can't possibly be on that wall based on what the interiors look like. So. And I left the best for last. I think Jack Stanfield Lee is looking through Nick's photos that the courier has brought them. Parker Simonson says, "I don't think she could ever figure that you aren't where the government or the press thinks that Jack should be." And Jack says, "But it could just be a matter of time, till she figures it out, with all these reports of Lee being in Europe holding secret meetings. They're on the air every day." Parker Simonson says, "With the timetable being what it is, I think we have to proceed on our regular schedule." He tells the courier she has until Friday. And Jack says, "You do realize it's Cece Capwell's daughter." And Parker Simonson says, "It wouldn't matter to me if it were your daughter."
Now, I found the wording of that very interesting. What do you make of it?
I need you to tell me, because I know.
Oh, you know.
I know everything.
Well, just the way he words it. It's almost third person, so I'm almost wondering if this Jack is a double of the real Jack? Perhaps.
It would be very weird to introduce someone's evil twin before the viewers actually met the person that's being twinned.
It would.
It would be probably the only time in the history of soap operas that something like
that would be weird, but it's just the way he's referring to Stanford Lee in the third person. I just find odd. Now, maybe it is the real one and he's drugged out. I don't know. But he's definitely... Nothing about him is what we would expect of a high-profile lawyer who apparently has the ear of presidents. He doesn't seem to actually practice law. He's holed up in a house with a weirdo in a quilted bathrobe, and
I think it looks sucked to me.
receiving
It's meant to be
packages
sucked.
and planning the assassination
And
of
just chain smoking
his
cigarettes.
best friend's daughter. So definitely something is very off, and all right now, just because of that third person delivery, I would almost guess some kind of doppelganger replacement. For real
Well, I
stuff,
think
or
there's
the-
some evidence for that. The very first time he meets Augusta, he says, "Oh, she sounds like whatever," and then the guy says, "Well, you've met her before." "Oh, yeah, right."
Yeah,
And then later, he doesn't remember what Jack inscribed on the cigarette case,
yeah.
and he makes something up that's wrong. So I
So-
think there's enough evidence there to support your theory.
So that's just an idea I have, and that if the real Jack Stanfield Lee is so high end, so someone who's so prominent, maybe replacing him with a doppelganger would give someone an entree to power. So that's the only thing I could think. But where Amy's baby fits into all this, I have no
It
idea.
seems to be an odd sideline
Yeah,
to someone who's got the ear of the president, but also I'm in this baby selling thing. It's weird that I assume the two things just are coincidental and they just happen to involve Jack, but will they somehow tie in together? That would be, I can't remember. I remember only a little bit about the Amy storyline, and I guess I can't even remember the other storyline. So, I don't know. I'll be as surprised as you if they end up somehow dovetailing. That would be amazing. If they're just two things that happen to include that character.
yeah. I mean, all I can think is that it does seem like if they've got this doppelganger, if that is where this is going, he needs to be established somehow. So they set up this fake office in Santa Barbara. When you think about it, a very prominent lawyer who
Keeps refusing legal cases.
He
for
keeps
some
refusing legal cases, and if he is working with presidents and world leaders, he would probably be more likely to be based in Washington or a world capital rather than Santa Barbara.
I mean, is it possible it's an assassination attempt on the president?
That's
And that Jack Stanfield Lee is really on that thing, and they've switched him out
yeah.
just because this meeting is coming up where he has to report to the president. He'll have a chance to assassinate the president.
Yeah.
Could that be it?
So
We
those
got
are
a couple secret agents on the show.
Yeah.
Suss it
So
out.
that's all I can think. It's a very weird storyline. Maybe the baby swapping thing is some sort of source of income to finance this entire operation. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to assume Amy's not the only baby.
Yeah.
So it should be very...
They've got a whole
expensive.
assembly line of naive, irritating women who they artificially inseminate. Then, maybe this is a real money-making operation to finance more nefarious operations.
I mean, it's an interesting puzzle, and I just have like 2 or 3 glimpses of scenes in my head. I can't really see how it fits together. I just don't remember. So
But you know more about it than I do, as you said.
I remember one. I remember, as I said, only one scene with Jack. Although every time we see another one, I remember, oh yeah, that kind of seems familiar. But don't remember anything about how the plot goes. So, and don't know what happens with Amy's baby at all. So, yeah. Well, it looks like Amy's storyline goes on very well without her actually being on the episode.
Yeah,
so,
that's kind of nice.
that's nice.
Yeah.
We've got Jack and Brick and Parker Simonson, a courier, and Kelly is now the lead in Amy's story.
We just need Jackie's storyline to go on without her,
Actually,
or
it's
to
3
wrap up
things,
really
because
soon.
there's the smuggling, and
Yeah.
there's the baby stealing, and there's the whatever Jack Stanfield Lee's up to. So
Yeah, and we don't really know his ties with the Lockridges or really with the Capwells either. Either the real one
Mhm.
or
yeah,
if this one isn't the real one, what what his deal is. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got an exciting piece of the puzzle that's going to show up in the next episode. Because I do remember one thing. And looking at IMDb, I think we'll find something out today.
All right.
Or maybe there'll be a cliffhanger and we'll really find out the next day.
So we are going into a Friday episode, I believe. No.
We're done the week.
We're done the week. This was it.
We usually watch a new one right after we've recorded the previous one. And so probably in about 5 minutes we'll be watching episode 198 of Santa Barbara, and we'll be starting week 41.
This didn't feel like a really, heavy-duty cliffhanger, though. That's why.
The final scene of the show was Kelly latching the door.
Yeah.
After Nick gives her the thing, yeah. So that's not really a Friday show, is it?
We're used to, she should be falling off a cliff or something. At this point.
Even Will You Marry Me would have been a Friday type thing. I don't know. We had a one week a few weeks ago where a Thursday episode was so exciting we thought they must have expected a preemption that never happened. So
yeah,
maybe something is still out of sync. All right, we'll be back in not a few minutes. We'll be back in a week with week 41. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Out chasing ambulances and other sirens?